Good evening. My name is Ashley, and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. And I have overcome depression and sexual trauma, including domestic rape, and a host of other things. And currently, I'm working on fear of rejection.
And my name is Canaan. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus. And I idolized alcohol and abused alcohol for 30 years. Everything in my life had to do with alcohol. It was a shrine when you walked in my house. And it was absolutely devastating. Um, it was fun while it lasted, and it came with a very, very heavy price that I'm not willing to pay. In my life now, God has transformed me into a new person. And I walk different, I think different, I look different, I behave different, I have a different circle of friends, I have a new life. And I'm so grateful to be delivered from that, because I would say devastation is the word that I've been delivered from. So tonight we've got a lesson, you guys, on amends, and I just broke my glasses. There's one of my lenses, so this is going to be fun. So I'll be I'll be holding my book out in front of me. That'll happen to y'all one of these days. Don't laugh. You wake up and it's gone, seriously. So I did this lesson on amends a couple years ago, and I looked so frantically at the last minute today to find it so that I could recall how that went a couple years ago, because I am so different now than I was 2 years ago. And I did remember, I didn't find it, I didn't find the old lesson, but I remember something about it that I'll share with you when we get there. Amends is so important. It is, we can't get anywhere in our recovery until we go through the amends process. We just can't move, we get stuck. So Ashley and I are going to talk to you guys tonight about some of our experiences with amends. And we'll go through the lesson, and then we'll share with you some of the things that we've experienced in our own personal recovery as far as the amends goes. So y'all bear with me, because now I'm without glasses, and normally I have an extra. Let me see if I have a spare pair of readers.
While she's looking, I'm just going to piggyback a little bit on what she said about being stuck. Without making amends, I feel like we talk about pruning sometimes in the church. You hear the word pruning. We need to prune those dead leaves off of the branches. But it's harder when it's taken root. It hurts worse when it's taken root, but it's necessary. And sometimes the necessary process hurts. But the pain of not pruning it away lasts forever, whereas it's a temporary pain once you make those amends.
No glasses, but I do have two pair of sunglasses, not one but two. So they're, because you girls got to accessorize. Anyway, principle 6 is evaluate all my relationships, offer forgiveness to those who have hurt me, and make amends for harms that I've done to others, except when to do so would harm them or others. And that's in our Beatitudes. Happy are the merciful and happy are the peacemakers, Matthew 5:7 and 5:9. So on step 8, we made a list of all persons that we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And in Luke chapter 6, verse number 31, do to others as you would have them do to you. Step Study spends 2 months on evaluating relationships and making amends. And that's how important this is to our recovery, is 2 months. Yeah. So tonight we're going to give you an overview of Principle 6, which is all about making amends. Forgive me as I learn to forgive, and that sums it up pretty well. Yeah. And I had to learn to ask God to help me see others through Jesus' eyes. That's really where I made this step, because I didn't know how to forgive, and I didn't want to. I was so angry, and I was so bitter about what I had been put through and what I had been drugged through. I had to begin with a change in my heart. And so I learned to ask God to help me see that person through Jesus' eyes. And it worked. It didn't work immediately, but I had to take time and really think about what that meant. And I had to be willing. You have to have a willing heart.
And sometimes you have to do it through gritted teeth. and the first step. But once you do it through gritted teeth, it becomes easier. And then you really start to mean it. It's kind of like where, David's praise was very fleshly at first, but then it became more of his spirit man. So therefore, when we make that first step and do it even through gritted teeth, sometimes it's just hard to say, I forgive them, or I'm praying for my enemy. But then over time, it gets easier and easier, and then it's really heartfelt.
I began to see, what we say a lot here in CR, that hurt people. That's
right.
what they do, because they're destroyed and they are hurt for whatever we don't know, what's unseen. We don't know what their history is, and that's what they do. And you have to see that through Jesus' eyes, or we don't see it. All we see is what they have done to us, and we're mad about it. Mm-hmm. So that's the beginning of how to learn to forgive someone. But we started doing repair work on the personal side of our lives earlier in our recovery and the other processes by admitting our powerlessness, by turning our lives and wills over to God's care, by doing our moral inventory, by sharing our sins or wrongs with another, and by admitting our shortcomings and asking God to remove them. But now we begin to do some repair work on the rational side of our lives. Making your amends is the beginning of the end of your isolation from God and other people. I isolated the first year and a half that I was here, the first year and a half that I moved back home to Jonesboro. I had shame and I had regret and my pride, because there was a lot of the I told you so's out there. I left quite a reputation behind. I've been gone about 20 years, but believe you me, I've heard 3 different times in the last 3 years the comment, "I've heard you're back in town." I knew that I had left quite a reputation behind me from my old lifestyle, and the pride made me isolate. The shame and embarrassment of what I have gone through, and divorce, and the devastation, the DWIs, all of the embarrassing things that I have been through because of my lifestyle choices. I didn't want to hear, "I told you so." And that's my pride. When you don't want to admit where you've been, it stops your recovery. When you can't admit it, then you can't get well from it.
Right.
Still, some of us balk at making amends. We think, if God has forgiven me, isn't that enough? Why should I drag up the past, or why should I dig up the past? After all, making amends doesn't sound natural.
So I'm going to say here, my first husband was the one that, you'll hear my testimony later, but I was domestically raped multiple times a week throughout our short history of marriage. And he has still yet to this day, that was, we divorced in 2000. So still to this day, he has never once asked for an apology from me. But let me tell you something. I forgave him a long time ago, and I used to say I could serve him a meal without any animosity. But he's still a minister. He was a minister when we were married, and he's still a minister today. And I learned to pray for that man, pray for his marriage, and pray for his ministry. And that's how God has used me, because it's never too late. If he were to come to me today and ask for forgiveness, I could freely say, "I've already forgiven you," but that would release him from that regret if he has any. So the forgiveness that you give to somebody isn't about them, and the forgiveness you ask from somebody isn't about them. It's really you. It's your heart work. It's releasing you, because they may choose not to forgive you, which is a really hard place to be in. I've been there too, but it releases you. It's not necessarily about the other person. It's about God freeing you from that bond.
Wow. Before you can have the healthy relationships that you desire, you need to clean out the guilt and the shame and the pain that has caused many of your past relationships to fail. And I added in here in this really tiny writing, alcohol was involved in all of my failed relationships in one way or another. It was the direct cause of my divorce in January. And we have to clean out all of the guilt and shame if we want to go ahead and if we want to have healthy relationships in the future. So in the words of step 8, it's time to make a list of persons that we have harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. That doesn't mean pick up the phone today. What that means is on the paper that you guys all have there, we have some extras up here in the front if anybody doesn't have one, is to start writing your list. And there's someone that just came to your mind. The very first person came to your mind. Go ahead and write them down on your list. Save that list. At this point, you're only looking for the willingness. Step 8 only requires that we identify those that we need to make amends and to offer forgiveness.
Let me say, my mom and I have a really close relationship. I'm an only child, so I'm a little bit of a spoiled brat. But I had to forgive her for a lot of stuff because hurt people. And when she went through her divorce, she was hurting, and she hurt me not physically but emotionally. But I also, as a rebellious teenager in turn, hurt her. So I had to make those amends as an adult in life. But I also had to offer forgiveness for what she had done, even though she didn't ask for it. But once I told her that I was forgiving her, even though we'd had a pretty decent relationship, even in adulthood, it's made our bond that much stronger. So just because time has passed, or you think, oh, I have a good relationship with them, it can only make your relationship better. So I would say still go ahead and do that.
Wow. Luke 6:31 reminds us to treat others the way that we want to be treated. So for some of you, that may be very difficult. You've been hurt very badly or abused. Many of you have had nothing to do with the wrong that was committed against you. Often I've counseled people on Principle 6 and the critical importance of forgiveness only to have them say, never will I forgive. Not after what was done to me. In these cases, the wrong against the individual was often child molestation, sexual abuse, or adultery. Such sins are deep violations and they leave painful wounds, but they also are the root of dysfunction that bring many people into recovery.
Yeah, so I'm going to piggyback on that and talk about my first husband again. Those that have heard me up here sing or play the keyboard, I know I'm not like Beethoven when I play, and I know I don't sing like Celine Dion or anything, but I know God has given me a gifting and talent. But my first husband always told me, you cannot sing, you cannot play, and I believed him. I believed those lies. So we separated in 99. I had not seen him again since then. And about 2018, I was at another church, and I was leading worship. And it was during practice, and I also played, it was a guest evangelist, and I'm one of these, I learn kind of on the spot. If someone says, let's sing in the key of G, I just hit the G chord and follow along the best I can. And we got done practicing, and I was sitting on the piano bench, and my back was not to the audience, but it was, a side view, but I'm focused on the team. And I turned, and he's sitting 3 rows in front of me. And I thought, over time, that's Psalm 23:5. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And I had to get up and still lead worship that night. I will be honest, I was rattled, but I had a team of people praying for me because they knew I was rattled. I still got up and did it, not because of anything in me, but it was because of God. And I was doing it for God and for his glory. And I still did that. And he could not say, you can't sing and you can't play, even though I'd heard it for all those years. I had that table in front of my enemy. But the thing about it was I'd already forgiven him. So whether it tormented him or not, I don't know. But it did not torment me. So that's what forgiveness offers you.
Wow. Wow. You'll hear it again. Forgiving the perpetrator of such wrongs, even after you have dealt with the emotional pain, seems impossible. We're going to deal specifically with this issue in the lesson on 3 types of forgiveness. For now, listen to the way that Celebrate Recovery rewords this step for those who are in the sexual and physical abuse groups. If this is you, make a list of all persons who have harmed us and become willing to seek God's help in forgiving our perpetrators, as well as forgiving ourselves. Realize we've also harmed others and become willing to make amends to them. And that's how it was reworded. Let's look at the second part of Principle 6. Make amends for harm I've done to others, except when to do so would harm them or others. And in that circumstance, you guys, that's when there's been physical, violent, or mental abuse that it would harm someone by fear or devastation, or you know that they're seeking counseling, medical help. That would harm someone. So obviously, that would be the exception.
So I will say, when I forgave him, the person that I was counseling with, because I had to go through quite a bit of counseling, they specifically said, and they knew both of us because they had counseled with us when we were married, they said, do not put yourself in that situation. You write a letter and don't use your return address, because I didn't live in the same place. So I wrote a letter. I did not know whether or not it ever got to him, but I used my mom's return address because that was the last place he knew I was located. And I told my mom, I said, if you were to get this letter back, I need to know, because there's a purpose behind this envelope. And she never got it back. But she got a phone call, and they were looking for me. And she just said, she doesn't need to speak with you, and just left it at that. But I was not allowed to put myself in that situation. I didn't want to, but even my counselor recognized it. He said, don't put yourself in that situation. So I mailed a letter.
I love that. I mean, it's always safety first. Amends is so important in our recovery, but always safety first. Listen as I read Matthew 5:23-24. Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First, go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. And that's Matthew 5:23-24. The first part of Principle 6 deals with being willing to consider forgiveness. The second part calls us to action as we make our amends and offer our forgiveness. Going back to the garden metaphor, we need to pull out the dead weeds in our past and broken relationships so that we can clear a place for our new relationships that can be successfully planted and restored. That's why Principle 6 is so important. We must leave the past relationships where they belong, and that's in the past, you guys, because if we want to seek new godly relationships, we have to leave the past in the past.
And we can't always, if something triggers us, then that typically means that we're not completely healed from that situation. But a lot of times it'll just be an instance to where it reminds you of something. That doesn't mean that person is the same as the person in your past. So we also have to walk in grace, but also wisdom. So just realize that not everybody carries the same characteristics, have the same tendencies.
I'm trying to use you'll know them by their fruits, and that's what I look for when I'm evaluating people and evaluating new relationships in my life. You know them by their fruits, and we know the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness.
Long-suffering. Long-suffering.
Yes.
If they're with me, they've got to be long-suffering. My friends have to be long-suffering with me.
And self-control. I'm trying to remember all of them, but I look for that. And if the person that I'm wanting to include in my inner circle or in my life, if they don't have the fruits of the Spirit, they can just keep going, because I don't have room for that, and that's not the path that I'm on. So that would be a definite rule to seeking future relationships, is to look for the fruits of the Spirit, and if they don't have it, move on. Right. Column 1 on your paper there is where you list the persons to whom you need to be willing to make amends, to those that you have harmed. Column 2 is for the persons that you need to become willing to forgive, that has harmed you. List them this week. So during the next 2 months, add to the list as God reveals it to you. Add the other names to include everybody. So remember, all that you're doing at this point is that you're writing them down. So my thought is, on this paper, you guys, put your worksheet in your nightstand. Put it inside your toiletries bag, where you encounter it every day. Remember to write something on it. Put one of those pins on. There's pins in the front of the seats in front of you where you're sitting. Put a pin on top of that piece of paper. Fold it up, clip that pin on it, and put it to where you're going to encounter that list every day so that you can add to the amends list, the people that you need to forgive and that need to forgive you, that you need to make amends to, so that you can work on it every day.
The hardest one for me to put on that list and to keep on that list, because as you know, I tear myself up daily, is putting myself on there and forgiving myself. I am my own worst critic, and it's hard to forgive myself if I mess up or if I've done wrong. So that's one that pretty much stays on my list all the time.
Absolutely. Okay, so we have an acrostic. That's how CR rolls. We have an acrostic for amends, AMENDS. And A is admit the hurt and the harm. M is make a list. I had to dig deep, you guys, and this is why this is a 2-month thing if you're in the step study program. That's why it's a 2-month assignment. Make a list, work on that list, put it somewhere where you touch it and see it every day with your ink pen, and you have no choice but to write something down. You think about it and you can write something down. E is encourage one another. We need to stay connected, and we need to ask each other, how's that list coming? Did you add any more to your list today? How many names are on your list? Encourage each other so that we can get healing. N is not for them. This sets you free. Like Ashley was saying, this sets you free when you make amends. D is do it at the right time. D is do it. Just do it. But do it at the right time for you. And then S is start living the promises of recovery. And I wrote out here, start living.
Yes, start living. That's one of my things, the start living. So for the past 3 years, I have made a bucket list because I have things I want to do that I would say wasn't allowed to do some of them. I mean, none of them are bad. It's like try new foods, go places. I was a stay-at-home mom for 17 years, and I got $30 allowance a month. Yes, a month. And so that didn't free me up to do a whole lot. And now I'm just kind of living my life and enjoying it. And so I would say once you set those freedoms in place of forgiveness, live your life. Let it go and live. Yep. So the A is admit the hurt and the harm. Principle 4 showed us how important it is to open up to God and to others. Your feelings have been bottled up far, far too long, and that has interfered with all your important relationships. I'm going to pause right there, and I didn't even add this in my notes. Part of my testimony is I had gone through a period of time where I had told no one of my abuse. The only person I had told while it was happening asked me what I did to deserve it. And that cut to the core, and so I never said anything else. I ended up looking like I had leprosy. In the middle of July, I was wearing long sleeves and pants because I had sores, and the doctor said it was coming out my nerve endings. Everything that was bottled up inside me was coming out my nerve endings. And so once I started opening up, my sores went away, and I wasn't having to cover up anymore. So that's a hard thing to do sometimes because you have a hard time trusting, but at least find one person, just one person to open up to. In the step of recovery, you need to once again face the hurts, resentments, and wrongs that others have caused you or that you have caused to others. Holding on to resentment not only blocks your recovery, it blocks God's forgiveness in your life. Luke 6:37 tells us, "Do not judge others, and God will not judge you. Do not condemn others, and God will not condemn you. Forgive others, and God will forgive you." And for me, I just think about God has forgiven me of so much, and He has given me so much mercy and grace. And I just can't help but want to extend that to anybody else because I'm thinking, I can't sit on this. I can't sit on the goodness of God and not share it. It might be hard in the beginning, but there is so much. I've walked this out for so long. There's just so much freedom. And just think how much God has forgiven you. And He didn't even have to die on the cross for us, and He did. So with that much forgiveness, we need to really work on forgiving others.
As far as, the resentments go, you guys, I was stuck. I mean, I couldn't see past the blame and the deceit that I had endured. And so my resentments were powerful. And I had to make amends, and I had to find forgiveness to be able to move on. I was stuck. And in our recovery, we can't move forward until we find forgiveness in our heart. We will be stuck in the anger and the rage and the blame and the hate, and you stew and you brew, and it's like a poisonous infection, and they don't even realize, or they don't care because they're too busy doing their own life. And you have to get to a point where you're like, I am stuck. Lord, help me, show me how to forgive. Let me see this person through Jesus' eyes. And when you begin to pray that and you mean it, your heart will change.
Yes, it will.
On the next letter in amends is M for make a list. In column 1 on your inventory, you'll find a list of people that you need to forgive. These are the people who've hurt you. In column 5, you'll find the list of people whom you owe amends. These are the ones whom you have hurt.
Like I said, it's never too late. Even if you've done something or something has happened to you 30, 40 years ago, it's very important to do that, to ask for forgiveness, as long as it doesn't put you in a harm situation.
When you're making your list, don't worry about the how-tos in making your amends. Don't question, like, how could I ever ask my dad for forgiveness? How could I ever forgive my brother for what he did? Go ahead and put the person on your list anyway. And in Luke chapter 6, verse 31, it says, the Bible teaches us to treat others as you want them to treat you.
The E in amends stands for encourage one another. It has been said that encouragement is oxygen to the soul, and man, I can attest to this, that I have a tribe of people that I just call, they're just amazing. They are encouragers. I got one sitting beside me right now. I get encouragements from her almost every morning, and I love it. And I have some that are in this room and some that aren't in this room, and they keep me going. So just make sure you find that person that can give you that encouragement. Before your amends or offer your forgiveness to others, meet with your accountability partner or sponsor, someone to encourage you and to provide a good sounding board. That person's objective opinion is valuable to ensure that you make amends and offer forgiveness with the right motives. That's important. Do it with right motives. Hebrews 10:24 says, and let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. If you are asked to be an encourager, an accountability partner, or a sponsor, be honored. And remember, you cannot hold a torch to light another's path without brightening your own.
Right. The N in amends is the reason for making amends is not for them. And you need to approach those to whom you're offering your forgiveness or amends humbly, honestly, sincerely, and willingly. Don't offer excuses or attempt to justify your actions and focus only on your part. So when I did this 2 years ago, I remember my phone call. I had 2 phone calls that I had to make on it, and I had to do this lesson 2 years ago before I could lead it. and so I remember I was so nervous. I had everything pre-written and pre-rehearsed, and it was really brief because I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, goodbye. That was the plan, basically. And on the first call that I made or whatever, I got the voicemail, and I'm like, yes! It's a voicemail. So I read my little pre-rehearsed recording or whatever, my apology for my amends, and then I hung up, and immediately, I was brave then because I left a voicemail. I called the other person, and she answered the first ring, and I'm thinking, So then I got to read it. Okay, there's my little paragraph, and I was so nervous. I couldn't find it today to tell you guys exactly what it said, but I remember that part of the sentence was, I would like to acknowledge and apologize to you. And I was so nervous because I got to leave a voicemail on the first one. I said, I'd like to acknowledge. I put the two words together because I was so nervous, and I just wanted to get it over with because I had to do it. I had to experience it before I could lead it. I want to acknowledge to you. And I was just mortified. But then I slowed down, and she said, are you okay? And I said, I'm fine. I'm calling you to make apologies for what I have done to you and how I harmed you and how I embarrassed you in front of your family. I was able to recant it, but it was so hard to do that. Then, after that, the first person's voicemail called me back. So I had to do it. It wasn't a get out of jail free card. I actually had to go through with it. And so then I said, I would like to acknowledge and apologize to you. And I said it correctly. But I guess the point being made is it is stressful, and it is a hard thing to do, to swallow that pride. And to not justify, well, I only did it because, or it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is I hurt two of my very best friends and embarrassed two of my very best friends. And when I hung up with talking to both of them and that day was over and I could breathe, it was the biggest weight. It was gone. You guys, I can't tell you how important this is to make amends to whatever you have done, because no matter who has harmed you, you have also, at some point, you have harmed others. And we have to make the forgiveness, and we have to make the amends. Oh, did I finish reading it? I don't know. Sorry. So focus on your part, and yeah, that's it. Let's see. Okay. Go ahead. I was down here. Anyway, this bitterness and this anger that you're holding on to or whatever, it produces the 3 Ds, this book says: depression, despair, and discouragement. I wanted to add, mine was devastation. My D was complete and absolute devastation. Did I have depression, despair, and discouragement? Yes, but I had absolute devastation from it. So an unforgiving heart will cause you more pain and destruction than it will ever cause the person that hurt you.
Yeah, it's like a cancer. It'll eat at you.
Yes, it is.
Let's move on to the D in amends. We got to kind of hurry. Do it at the right time. It requires good judgment, courage, and willingness, but you also have to be careful at the sense of timing. Ecclesiastes 3:1 tells us there is a right time for everything. There is a time to let things happen and a time to make things happen. There is a right time and a wrong time to offer forgiveness or to make amends. Before making amends, you need to pray, asking Jesus Christ for his guidance, his direction, and his perfect timing. Sometimes that mean just writing a letter. Sometimes it's making a phone call, and sometimes it's a face-to-face visit. Philippians 2:3-4 says, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interest of others. Don't wait until you feel like making amends to do so. Do it when the time is right.
And then the last thing is S, and it's start living in the promises of recovery. And I want to emphasize, you start living.
Yes.
So that wraps it up as far as amends goes. You guys have your paper. Grab a pen out of the seat in front of you, wrap up your paper, clip that pen on your paper, put it somewhere where you will see it every day, where you don't have a choice but to encounter it, and get working on it. Spend the next 2 months. Write in your columns whom you need to forgive and who needs to forgive you, who you need to make amends to. And let's start working on our recovery, because we can do this, y'all. We can get better together, and we've got to put the work in to do it.
Yes.